G'day my friends, Marty, we're here from Marty's Garden on YouTube. I tell you what, I've got a super sick video for you today about soils. Yes, your 100% success formula for building the super foundation for growing amazing edibles at home. Now, I'm just going to start off with, because people always say, well, what about this and what about that? No, you're wrong about that, because I haven't gone into the little intricacies where I've got to probably be here for an hour and talk on the video. So I'm going to break it down really quickly where it wouldn't work. Let's just say you're straight on concrete, okay? Now I've seen it done on concrete, so but let's just say super highly acidic soils can be a real problem, or very, very alkaline soils, or you would take it to the far extreme, a poison soil, such as where in Byron Bay for years and years, where they had sand mining and it became radioactive. They had to let it sit for like 7 years before they could build on top of it, right? Things like that could be an issue. But generally overall, you can re-establish soils. And I'm going to tell you and give you the reasons why. And I'm going to break it down and give you the methodology and the science and the system. Well, look, I'm not a scientist, so I shouldn't say that. I've got to be so careful about what I say in here these days. Yeah, anyway, let's not get into that little rant, right? Establishing soils. It's really, really the base, the foundation. It's like you build your house on the rock, not on the sand, right? And when you establish a good foundation, you are onto it. Now, I'm going to start off with the humble weed, because most people hate weeds, including me, ones that take over the garden and just establish themselves, and they're really hard to get rid of. But a weed basically is just a pioneer species. Now, stick with me, because you're going to know this is going to get boring. Stick with me, right? So you can understand soils and how nourishment works and how plants get fed and things like that. A weed generally overall is what we call a pioneer species. It's the first thing to get on the ground when we've got an open space of ground. It needs to get the roots in there so it can start sending energy down into the ground, photosynthesizing and feeding sugars, and establish a new microbial system, a new soil living web. And once that happens, then other trees start to move in, the weed dies off and bigger plants come in. So we've got these sub plants that start building the forest. And if you understand forest development, or you've ever worked on a sort of a beach where they're replanting trees and things like that, you might get a bit of an understanding on that. So you've got the next tree that comes up to a smaller tree, and it might only live for approximately about 7 years. It establishes a new system, a new canopy, and then the bigger trees start sprouting up through and a forest starts growing. And the whole thing is turning into something that's living under the ground. Now, as gardeners, we can actually help that and nourish that to become a system in itself. And what we need to do is we need to feed the soil, not the plants. Now, some of you be going, I've heard this a million times, this is really boring. Feed the soil, not the plants. Come on, Marty, something new for us. Okay, so imagine the soil like a big sponge, and it's hard, it's rocky, but there's this nice little bit on top that's okay. You think, yeah, that would be growing, but once it gets down, whoa, terrible stuff. It just doesn't have the right body mass, you know. It doesn't have the right soil mass. It just doesn't look good. Well, there's lots of things you can do, like with clay. You can add dolomite and gypsum and things like that to sort of break up those clay particles and things. But what we want to do, because time is on our side, we need to establish a soil system like a forest does, right? Just like how creation is done. And it's always sort of dropping leaf litter and little sticks on top of each other and forming and building these layers up. That's why you see in soil profile photos and things like that, or you come along and see a cliff, you see all these different colors and stuff, because it's a soil profile and it's building on top of each other. So what we can do is create no-dig systems and feed the top of the soil with really good sort of humusy organic products, and allow the worms and the microbes and everything to start re-establishing themselves. Now, in the first year, it doesn't really look like much is going on, but within year 2, and you just keep feeding it, and you're making sure those roots are in the ground and the photosynthesis is hitting the leaves and sending the energy into the ground, you will find that it will start accelerating. And this is what I call the acceleration part, right? So fungi's moving in, microbes are breeding and building and establishing themselves. Little lizards are moving in. If you've got a nice wet area sort of thing, maybe the frogs are coming in, some new birds are turning up, and it's starting to create this own little ecosystem. And what you do is you just keep feeding the system and keep feeding it and keep feeding it and feeding it. What I do is I put bales on top of the ground. I've got heavy clay here, right, hard clay. It's one of the reasons why it floods so easy, because the water just doesn't drain away. And so I put bales on top, and I let the bales cure, and I just throw on compost on top. And I've got to make sure those bales are really wet, and because it's been raining a lot, it's been perfect for that, so we don't get ants and things in them and different stuff nesting and stuff inside them. They've got to be moist, right, before you start throwing on top. And then you start planting into them when they're ready, smaller crops, and as it's breaking down that system, and you know your soil profile is getting deeper because you're throwing on top, you can know it's getting deeper, putting your hands in there, it's very loose and fluffy and light. You can then start putting in larger plants, and then over time you start putting in even larger plants and start building little canopies and things like that. So I've got here, this is my bale garden here, and we've got a canopy going over the top of, I can put it just over here, I'll just move that camera there like that. You can see this is choco, right? And it's forming a canopy, and it's protecting the ground down below from like the full-on sun and stuff, right? And once this is sort of like cut back and I'm sort of coming this way a bit, I'm going to put a fruit or a nut tree there. I'm building the soil. This is a bale garden and lots of food coming out of it, and there'll be a fruit or a nut tree go in there soon. Not sure, got to find one at a decent price and which one I want to put in there, because I don't want it too big because I want it right near the house. But I'm building this soil system, and it's so productive and lots of food coming out of there. And once that tree grows up and establishes itself, I'll still be able to grow around the outside of it for years to come, because it'll take so long for that tree to get big. And then I'll be older and I'll be like, I really don't want to do all that work, but I've got this beautiful tree just growing there and being productive. And all I got to do is just feed that tree, because I've already built a nice big soil system around it, a deep living soil web where it's got the roots down nice and deep. And when it does have dry lean times, which we will have coming up, because it gets wet and it gets dry, it gets wet and it's dry, typical for Australia stuff, it'll have a nice big root system. I can go away on a little holiday and not have to worry about it. I just have to mulch and throw a bit of compost around it and make sure it's okay. So when we build soils and feed the soils and establish systems, we really accelerate much more forward quickly. Generally the first year, things are a bit slower. Now, if you saw my last video about the 100% success formula for fruit trees, it will be around here in a card somewhere. Check that out. I talk about that a little bit more in a different way about how I'm growing fruit trees using a similar system. And I'm going to teach you about regeneration and soils, growing amazing food at home, and we're going to be up on the farm at 560 soon too, composting, growing food, and doing some really awesome stuff. So keep an eye on the channel, guys, and we're going to bring out stuff that's not really spoken about so much. It is a bit hard to film when we talk about these type of things, but if you listen in and you start getting an understanding, it simplifies itself and it will set you up for life on how to grow amazing fresh food at home. If you're digging the videos, when you're digging the 100% success, well, I don't know if it's a series, I've just been bringing them out. Let me know in the comments box down below. Love you all. I'm going to see you real soon, and I'm going to go feed the chickens. They just don't stop complaining. Bye for now.